You are on 94.9. It's 16 past 4. And it's time for our Creation Ministries International segment. And we have Dr. John in the studio. Good afternoon, Dr. John.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mick.
It's great to have you back in here again. And, of course, today we're going to be looking at, amongst other things, Lucy.
Yeah, look, it's great to be back in the saddle too, Mick. And look, I wasn't able to listen for the last couple of weeks. I had things on, but I have heard some good reports about your discussions with the Kiwi guys, Mark James and Mike Cook. So, it's good for me to be back. I really, really look forward to coming over because I've missed it.
Yeah. Well, they even said nice things about you too.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, but look, you've mentioned Lucy, and this really is something amazing. You know, you sent me an article from Science Alert.
Oh, by the way, it wasn't only Science Alert that ran this story. This is a very recent story, and I think, I don't know who brought it out first, but the media cottoned onto the story. And I've seen the pictures in all sorts of weird places in the last couple of weeks. But this one in particular was in Science Alert.
Yeah. Well, for our listeners, Lucy is a pretty famous fossil. The name that they gave it is Australopithecus afarensis. Now, Australopithecus just means southern ape. So that's what it is. But Lucy's supposedly famous in the transition from ape to human, according to the evolutionists. Mm-hmm. And it's a fossil that was found back in the 1970s by a guy called Donald Johanson, and he's been a pretty well-known fossil hunter for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. But you've got up there on the screen, and I sent you it because I've kept it, a photo of what Lucy's bones actually are. And it's a collection of a few bones, about 20%, I suppose, of the skeleton. But that doesn't really tell you much when you have a look at those bones. But according to the article in Science Alert and on the other ones that you read, a team from Cambridge University decided they would have a play. I don't know whether they actually had any access to the bones, but they must have had models of them or something, and they decided to do some computer modelling about what Lucy might have looked like.
Yeah.
Well, what they came up with was just amazing. They reckon they are able to tell from those few bones that Lucy walked upright and was quite muscular.
Yes.
And they decided that Lucy had spent most of her time in the trees, but was able to walk like a human being and was pretty strong and robust and so on. And I was just astonished. She was found in Ethiopia, and how the Cambridge people could have come up with the idea that they did, the computer modelling, feeding all sorts of information into their computer. I thought it was just amazing, and it just shows you what you can do if you feed all sorts of different information into a computer. You'll get it to spit out exactly what you want.
Absolutely. I do have to ask, Dr. John, we have an image here in front of us of the bones that they actually found. Now, you are a doctor for humans, not vets. Do they look like human bones to you?
No, they just look like the bones, but they're able to sort them into upper arm and lower arm and so on. But the feet are missing, and one of the thigh bones is missing, and on the other side the lower leg bones are missing. So how they were able to determine from that Lucy walked upright like a human, it really is beyond belief. But that's what they came up with. And of course, when you get the artist to start drawing what Lucy might have looked like, well, they can use their imagination, and they come up with something that looks very, very human. But of course, you can't tell when you look at those bones, you can't make anything human out of that. you can't make much ape out of it either.
Yeah.
It's just a collection of a few bones, about 20% of the skeleton. But it just shows you what you can do if you feed information into a computer and then get an artist to work on what it spits out. And when what look like photos appear in a magazine or in an article, they look very, very realistic.
Yeah.
You know, and somebody looking at that might think, well, gee, they've actually found something along the human lineage. Okay, it's 3 million years old supposedly, but it looks pretty human. And maybe we did evolve from apes after all. You know, but because that's the way you get convinced, because this sort of propaganda, and that's really what it is presented to you time after time after time, and you see all these supposed artist drawings of what these animals might have looked like. It's pretty convincing for evolution.
I mean, even they're crumbs that are left of the skull to actually come up with the images that I've seen of the face and the head. I just think those few little crumble bones, there's no way.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't think so. And of course, the way the artist draws the eyes is very important as well, because apes have got brown eyes, whereas we've got white eyes, right? And they can make them look more human by lightening up the colour of the eyes, you know, and making a gaze that looks straight ahead rather than possibly to the side, which apes have more than humans. But I mean, you can't produce that from the bones that they've got.
Not even close.
No, but look. It'd be laughable, really, if it wasn't so serious, because our eternity depends on what we believe about the whole creation story and the salvation history story that the Bible is. And when you've got a completely different story about evolution from ape to human and so on, then a lot of people are convinced by that, and their eternal destiny is put at risk. So that's why it's so serious. I mean, you'd think it's a bit of a joke or it's laughable, but the consequences are not a joke, and they're not laughable. And so that's one of the reasons why we exist at Creation Ministries. We really want to make the point to people that you really can't believe all that masquerades really as science. It's not science, it's just playing around and getting the result that you want out of computer modelling.
Yeah. Well, look, I did hear that a chap has found a unicorn around that same site. The unicorn was buried at about 3 feet deeper, and interestingly, they found most of the bones. They've got like 98% of the skeleton. You won't believe which part was missing.
Perhaps the horn.
Oh, yeah. You are on 94.9. It's 4:25. We'll be back with Dr. John very soon. If you have any questions for him, please send them through to our text line 0401 949 949. You're on 94.9. It's 24 minutes to 5, and we have Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. He's been talking to us today about Lucy, who's been in the news recently because they reconstructed her, turned her into a real person and gave her a face and hair and eyes and all sorts of things, although most people didn't realise up until then that all they had actually found was a few bone pieces. And don't even think there was many full. In fact, by the looks of that picture, there's no full bones in there. There's literally bone pieces. And, very interesting, Dr. John. I mean, we hear all these stories about, the Lucys and the, dinosaurs, that sort of thing. We sometimes get a picture of a bone and they've drawn amazing dinosaur pictures and you sort of look at it and then all of a sudden, years later, they go, and they've got feathers. Let's just draw feathers all over them as well. And I mean, the artists are amazing, aren't they?
Well, they really are, and of course, what you just mentioned then is the big thing these days: feathers on dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Because all of that is partly to do with the belief that dinosaurs evolved into to birds.
Mm.
But look, I really wanted to talk about dinosaurs today, and I was prompted to do that by one of our regular listeners. So hello, Sylvia. It's good to know that you're going to be listening again. But we are going to talk about dinosaurs today. I mean, we've talked about them a lot in the past, but it's about time we gave them another mention because, Mick, there's a bit of an event that's coming up that your church is running.
Yes, absolutely. It's the Winter Family Fun Fest down on the waterfront in Gosford on Wednesday the 12th of July between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. There's everything from live shows and craft and games and food and drinks and treats and surprises, and it's all completely free. But they've got a dinosaur tent.
They are, yeah, Mick, and I got rung up by a couple of people from your church, and they said, "Would you like to come along?" So I'm going to be there.
That wasn't very nice. Were they calling you the dinosaur, or
no?
Oh, good.
They're probably calling me the dinosaur expert, but I mean, who would be an expert on dinosaurs? You know, so
well, you got a lot of knowledge.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to tell the kids a few truths that they're not likely to learn at school. Maybe the adults who come with them will learn a few truths as well. But it is amazing how fascinated people are by dinosaurs, and it's not just children, it's adults as well. And I was thinking about why the fascination, but we are fascinated with all the animals, you know. I mean, that's why zoos are so popular. You know, we're all familiar with dogs and cats and horses and farm animals and things like that. But people love to go to zoos to see lions and tigers and giraffes and zebras and.
Well, I was playing with the unicorns on the weekend.
Well, that's right.
Horns.
Yeah. And we are fascinated by dinosaurs. And although we've been having a bit of a go at the artists who draw things like Lucy. Putting a body on a few bones.
Yep.
I think they've probably done fairly well with the dinosaurs. You know, they've managed to make good models of them, because with a lot of the dinosaurs they have actually got quite a few bones and quite a few skeletons. And
they still do change their theories now and again, though. Remember?
Oh yeah, they do.
T-Rex. They got to a point where they said, "Oh no, T-Rex. There's actually 3 different species." Then now they're saying, "Oh no, they're all part of the same."
Yeah, well, that's because the juveniles and the parent ones don't quite look the same. And,
what do you know?
So yeah, there's a lot of things that we don't know. But look, the other thing that fascinates people about dinosaurs is their supposed age, because we keep hearing that they're 65 million, or they died out 65 million years ago.
Yeah.
But you know, when you think about it, is that true? And of course, our answer at Creation Ministries is that it's most certainly not true, because the Bible tells us that the whole of creation only took place about 6,000 years ago.
Yep.
Now, that sounds amazing to people who've been brought up on a regular dietary propaganda of millions and billions of years, and at least 65 million years for the dinosaurs. But really, when you look at the evidence, it's all on the side of the Bible being absolutely true. And that means that because man and the animals were all created on the same day, then that means that humans must have lived alongside dinosaurs.
Yep.
Now, when you tell people that, they think that's laughable. But of course, it's not laughable, because that's what the evidence shows. And I think I'm going to have a look at, first of all, whether the dinosaurs, there's evidence that they did live alongside people. And is there any evidence that they're not the age that most people talk about, like 65 million? And I'm going to have a look at both of those today, because I think they're very, very important.
Yep.
And while it's true that we don't see dinosaurs anymore, history is full of evidence for them. And of course they weren't called dinosaurs because dinosaur is a new word in the English language. It was only coined in about the 1840s, and a combination of two words meaning terrible lizard. But the animals themselves were well known before that, but they were called dragons.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of evidence for dragons living alongside people in history, particularly in Europe and of course China. I mean,
Yes.
the Chinese have named one of the years in their calendar after the dragon, and all the other years are ordinary animals. So there's no reason to suppose that the dragon wouldn't have been one of them.
Yep.
But really, when you look at the history of Europe, there are so many places that are named after the various dragons that live there. You know, woods and forests and lakes and things like that are often named about the after the ferocious animal that lived there.
Yep.
I mean, we all know about Loch Ness, of course, with Nessie, and there have been plenty of pretty credible sightings of an animal in Loch Ness that looks like some sort of plesiosaur or water-dwelling dinosaur. But it's not just that. You know, you think of St. George and the Dragon and that epic poem from Scandinavia called Beowulf, which talks about an animal called a Grendel, which from the description sounds very much like a T-Rex. And in that poem, that animal killed 30 Viking warriors in a single night. Now, you know, there's no animal alive today that could kill 30 armed Viking warriors in a night. But the Grendel was obviously a very, very fearsome creature.
Yep.
And when you think of names like there's a town actually near Launceston called Grindelwald, but it's named after another town in, I think, Switzerland called Grindelwald, and that means the wood where the Grendel lived. That's how they got the name of the town.
Yeah.
And the same goes for lots of lakes and forests and things like that in other parts of Europe. So the evidence for those sort of animals living alongside people is pretty impressive. The Welsh have lots of animal names, and we don't know what those animals were. But you know, the stories from Wales of flying reptiles, you know, they only go back about 150 or 200 years. You know, they're not that long ago, and people were very familiar with them. But the modern person tends to dismiss that as mythology, but it's not mythology. It's actually real history. And when you think of some of the other evidences that we have, and there's two that I'd like to mention today, there's the Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia and Carlisle Cathedral in England. Now, if we start with the temple, there are lots of animal carvings at that temple, and one of them is of an animal that every child with a dinosaur picture book would recognise as a Stegosaurus. You know, it's an animal with bony plates along its back.
Yep.
And those carvings were done when the temple was built 800 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, 800 years ago, they didn't have any dinosaur picture books to copy from.
Yeah.
So to be able to carve an animal like that, they must have actually seen and be familiar with the live animal. At Carlisle Cathedral, there's a tomb for a bishop, Bishop Bell, and the tomb dates back to about the 1490s, I think, you know, obviously about the time Columbus was discovering America, so it's a long time ago. But There are a lot of brass carvings around that tomb of everyday animals and fish and so on, but there's another brass carving of what looked like two sauropod dinosaurs fighting. Now, if you go back 500 years or whatever, when that carving was done, they didn't have any dinosaur picture books to copy from either. Yeah. So whoever did that carving must have been familiar with the live animals. And on one of those dinosaurs, they've even got the spiky tail that we recognise from our dinosaur picture books.
Yep.
So really the evidence, when you think about it, is overwhelming that those animals did live alongside people.
Yep.
And I mean, there's rock carvings and cave drawings right throughout the world, plenty from Egypt and Babylon and other places of animals that everybody would recognise as dinosaurs. So how did people get to draw those? Obviously because they lived alongside them and they drew pictures of the animals that they were familiar with.
Even the Bible talks about some pretty impressive sort of, they sound like maybe dinosaurs.
They do. In the book of Job, we have one called Behemoth, which was a land-dwelling creature, and another called Leviathan, which was a sea creature. But God says to Job, look at the Behemoth, which I've made, you see. And he talks about a huge animal with a tail like a cedar tree. Well, we don't have any huge animals these days with tails like cedar trees. Elephants and rhinos and hippos have got little wispy tails, so it can't be them. And really, when God says to Job, look at the Behemoth which I've made, then Job must have been familiar with what he was talking about.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise God wouldn't have said it like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you look at what the Bible says and the history of humanity, then there's no doubt that people did live alongside dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And then when you go into some of the scientific evidence, it gets even more so, because the scientific world was astonished, and when we come back, I'll talk about the discovery of dinosaur blood, because that really was an event that made the scientists sit up and take notice.
All righty, that sounds good. You are on 94.9. It is 10 minutes to 5. You're on 94.9. It is 5 minutes to 5. We've got Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. He'll be back again next week as well. If you have any questions for Dr. John, please send them through to our text line 0401 949 949. Yes, that's an SMS line, 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, you've talked a lot about dinosaurs and the overwhelming evidence that men were looking at dinosaurs. I mean, that we live beside dinosaurs. A lot of these, you know, cave paintings and rock drawings and artworks and descriptions in the Bible and stuff, they've all been in the last, couple of thousand years, really. And, even a couple of thousand years ago, even 1,000 years ago, they hadn't found enough dinosaur bones at that stage to be able to piece them all together to be as accurate as their paintings and descriptions are of what we now know is actually true.
Well, that's right. I mean, the hunt for fossils was just not on those centuries ago. It really only kicked off probably in the 1800s. But look. Some of the scientific discoveries that have been made in recent times really are astonishing, and there was one in particular that really made the scientific world sit up and take notice, and that was there's a lady called Mary Schweitzer, who's a world authority on everybody's favourite dinosaur, T-Rex.
Yep.
And she goes hunting for T-Rex fossils. And she found one at a place in Montana called the Hell Creek Formation. Mm-hmm. And that's a very interesting place because it's a graveyard of lots of dinosaurs. And unlike a few other places like, say, Winton in Queensland, where They're buried in sediment and they're pretty dry, and the bones have been fossilised, like they've turned to stone.
Mm-hmm.
In this Hell Creek formation, a lot of the carcasses are not completely fossilised, particularly the bones. The soft tissue's not obviously there.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Mary found this T-Rex skeleton there. And when people hate going there, by the way, because it stinks.
Yes.
Because they're rotting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they got this bone from a T-Rex, and they decided to dissolve out the calcium in the bone. It hadn't turned to stone. And when they did that, what they found was they had soft tissue left. You know, and actual collagen fibres and blood vessels, and they were actually able to squeeze red blood cells out of one of the blood vessels. You know, T-Rex blood.
Yes.
And of course the scientific world was absolutely astonished, and they did what they always do. You know, they ridiculed it and said, can't be right, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But when it was obvious that it wasn't ridiculous and that it was true, then of course they had to decide, well, you know, maybe soft tissue and red blood cells can last for 65 million years.
Yeah, right.
You know, we never thought they could, but
Yeah.
they must, because we know they're not 60. We know that they're not only thousands of years old; they are 65 million years old.
Yeah.
They didn't even think that perhaps they ought to rethink the idea of the 65 million years. But no, you can't go there. You've got to find some way of working out how soft tissue and red blood cells can last for 65 million years.
Yep.
And they've come up with a few sorts of theories, but of course it's just ridiculous. I mean, the obvious answer is they're not 65 million years old.
Yeah.
Maybe they're only a matter of thousands of years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've talked to us before. I think it was a few years ago we were talking about identifying a body from a murder or something. Only in the last 100 years, it was 50 years ago or something, and they had issues with identifying, even looking at, you know, little tiny bits of DNA, and the fact that you're talking about, you know, blood vessels. That means its DNA's quite intact.
Well, there'd certainly be some DNA that could be sequenced from it.
Yeah.
And of course, when we've talked about carbon dating and things like that before, and when they've carbon dated dinosaur bones, they've actually, well, you don't take too much notice of the date, but they have actually found carbon-14 in them. Now, that's impossible if they're millions of years old. It's scientifically impossible.